The National Museum of Funeral History presents The Final Curtain Never Closes. I'm your host, Genevieve Keeney Vasquez, the president and CEO of the museum. And today I'm very happy to welcome Jason Engler, who is a historian on cremation, has one of the world's largest collections of urns in the world. And we are here to talk about our wonderful journey in creating the History of Cremation exhibit, and where I actually got to meet Jason and learn to work with him. So welcome, Jason.
Thank you so much, Jen. It's so good to be here with you. And you make it sound like you had to learn to work with me.
Yeah, there was a bit of a learning curve.
We had a good time. That's for sure. We've had a good time.
Yeah, I basically just learning the knowledge that you have. That's what I talk. When I talk about learn, it was understanding the depth of the history that is like seriously locked in that brain of yours. I want to say perplexed by it. And I was like, really? How does this man know all of this stuff? Fascinating. So tell me, where did this journey begin? When did you start this fascination with cremation?
Way back. So it actually started when I was about 8 years old, and my step-great-grandfather passed away. And he was cremated, and I just always thought that was fascinating. And I remember seeing his urn. And then a few years later, I started becoming interested in being a funeral director. And when I became interested in being a funeral director, I remember we were driving by a cemetery, and my dad said, "Jason, you like cemeteries so much. Why don't you become an undertaker?" And I was trying to figure out what an undertaker was. I went to the library, and of course, the only thing I could find was The Undertaker, the professional wrestler. Because you have to realize this was in the 90s, and professional wrestling was like in big time. So as I went through this process of learning about undertakers, I also met, in air quotes, the undertaker's manager, Paul Bearer. And Paul Bearer was this like spooky, kooky mortician guy who would lead the undertaker out into the arena, and he would lead the undertaker with this urn. And I was absolutely fascinated with the urn. So I took, I started on this like journey of trying to find that urn because I wanted to find one like it. I knew I could, and I knew it had to be a real urn because it looked like a real urn. And that started the process. And soon thereafter, I started calling urn companies and getting urn catalogs and learning more and more about products and product lines and that sort of thing. And went through that whole process all through my teenage years. And by the time I turned 20, there was a new book published about the history of cremation. And I got that, and that started my journey on the history of cremation. So it was an interesting source that it came from, which I'm not. I used to be a little leery of saying that to people that I learned. I became interested in urns from Paul Bearer because they're like, who?
Yes. If you're not from that time.
If you're not,
if
or
you weren't
from that
watching
era.
If you weren't watching WWE, you just don't know. But interesting enough, they make comebacks, right?
Yes.
In different interesting ways.
Yes,
and
for sure.
And I look forward to having another show with you.
Yeah, we'll have
so
to
that
talk
we
about
can
that.
really talk about our journey together that continued after our History of Cremation exhibit. Where we actually had the undertaker here at the museum.
Here in the building.
Yes, as well as that famous urn that you sought, found, and was very kind to lend to the museum and have it showcased for quite some time.
Yeah, that'll be a fun episode.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, listeners, for that because it'll be fun.
So let's talk about the history of cremation. I tell listeners from time to time, and people always ask, what's my favorite exhibit? And, it's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah, that's not fair. It's like asking your favorite child.
Exactly.
It's just not fair. Yeah.
And so I said, well, I have to say maybe most recently is now the history of cremation exhibit. One, because it's probably our second largest exhibit in the museum. Mm-hmm. But I was personally involved with you in every step of the way, from the conception of it all the way forward to the actual grand opening of it. And still today, getting to update it from time to time when we learn of new things. So let's talk about how our journey began. When I was listening to our visitors and they were requesting, why isn't there anything in the museum on cremation? So please remind me, how that journey started.
Well, there was also a discussion about the same time with the Cremation Association of North America, which you and Barbara, who's the executive director there, it's my understanding y'all met at a convention and started talking more in depth about this. And from there, I was the historian for CANA, the Cremation Association. So it made sense for me to become involved in it. And when I started to become involved in it, it kind of grew and grew and grew, because originally, I think from what my understanding is it wasn't known that there was such either a collector or B, a person who knew the history and had the knowledge of it. So I kind of, by default in a lot of ways, or it made sense for me to become involved. But gosh, when I did, we didn't mess around.
Yeah, we took off. And the things that became available to us, I think, became part of that journey, right?
Yes, yeah. And we'll talk about that because we definitely need to talk about our road trip.
Oh, that road trip was fascinating, right? So let's say, the first time we went out there, I kind of lend it to like a fishing trip, right? Mm-hmm. You cast your net out there, and I think that's how we started when we were working with Barbara. Mm-hmm. And, Barbara was on our podcast for the month of March. So if you missed that, please go back and you get to meet her and learn about her role with CANA. But we took a net and we kind of cast it out there, right? And we just kind of dragged that net along and saw, kind of waited to see what it caught, right?
Unfortunately, at the beginning, it didn't really catch a lot.
No, it didn't.
It wasn't until we really started in earnest the plans to go through everything and really started getting an idea together. And that happened. You and I met officially in person, October of 2015.
Wow. Great memory.
Well, that's because I'm a historian, dear. All sorts of things bouncing around up here. But then from there, just a few weeks later, we flew to Washington, Pennsylvania. Well, we flew to Pittsburgh and then drove down to Washington. And Washington is where the first crematory in the country was built in 1876. And one of the things that I loved was your willingness about what can we do to make this something that people want to see. Let's make it something that they can experience, and that's not just a
information
wall.
on a text panel.
Because who likes museum exhibits that are just that?
Exactly.
I mean, it's hard.
You might as well just pick up a book, right? So, and one of the things that when you're designing exhibit is all the different learning angles that people. You've got people who learn from reading and people who learn from seeing and people learn from experiencing. Yeah. So, and nowadays, you think of Disney, right? It's all about immersion, right? It's about that.
It's all about experience.
Yeah, it's experience and making them feel there. So, so why not? Let's bring the first crematory in North America here to Houston.
It was funny because there was some discussion when we were initially talking about the exhibit. I don't know if you were part of I think I mentioned this to you. I don't think you were part of the conversation, but some of the past presidents and Barbara from CANA and I had talked about, they said, why can't we go get the Lemoyne crematory and move it to Houston and, something like that? Is there a way that we could buy it or do something like that? And the Lemoyne crematory is the first crematory in the country in Washington, Pennsylvania, and it's a building. They literally were built as buildings. So it's not like modern crematories where it's like a machine that picks up and moves or with a crane or something like that. This is a full-on building.
Yeah, with brick walls and everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, and how long is that building? That building's from the 1800s?
1876.
I think if you even think of removing one nail, it's like a deck of cards,
who knows,
right?
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen. So what did we do? We sat in the lobby of the hotel in Washington, Pennsylvania, and we came up with the idea to basically reconstruct.
Yeah, build it ourselves, take the whole concept, right? Mm-hmm. So I remember us being there with the Historical Society, and they allowed us to walk through and take measurements of everything.
It was such a cool thing.
And so, we took all of those details and took them to St. Louis. But there was this journey that we took between Pennsylvania to St.
gosh.
Louis.
It started in Pennsylvania for you, dear, but it started for me in Newark.
Yes. Let's talk about that heavy door we had to pick
Oh my
up.
gosh, that was so interesting. But I'm glad we had it because of the snow. Remember the snow?
The snow, yes, it helped give us the weight to the vehicle.
It gave us the weight to the vehicle.
But how many people can you say are riding around the country with a 500-pound iron door to a crematory?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I kind of wish we had gotten pulled over just so we could,
explain what that was, right? Yeah. It's
Come have a look, sir.
Yeah. Being in the museum field, I don't hesitate to go pick up a casket and have it in the back of a van, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to us, it's nothing, but to the outside person looking in, I think it's like, what?
It's creepy. So that door, so let's talk about that road trip. Yeah. So after we got the museum exhibit kind of concept down, and one of the things I'd like to say about that is that we measured that building, and our exhibit is exactly the same measurements with two exceptions. The first exception is that we had ADA doors.
Correct.
We had to do that. So the doors are a little bit wider. And the other is to make more room in the cremator room. The first room you walk in the exhibit, we had to make the cremator about 2 feet shorter so that we had enough room to show everything we wanted to show in that room. But other than that, it is exact replicas. Yeah. In fact, the table, what we would call a bier or a catafalque, the table was such a perfect replica that when I took a picture and sent it to Clay Kilgore at the Washington County Historical Society, he told me later, he said, I drove up to the crematory to make sure that you didn't come steal mine because it looks so much like it. And it really does. It's amazing what our fabricator did to just create this perfect replica of the whole experience.
Yes, it is. And then of course, let's talk about some of the artifacts that the Historical Society were kind enough to lend us. I mean, we have a small apothecary jar with actual cremated remains.
Yes. Yeah. The actual cremated remains of Baron de Palm, who was the first person cremated in a modern cremation chamber in the United States.
Yes.
And there are only, so the primary part of his remains were scattered at sea is what the historical record says. But the Washington County Historical Society actually has only about 3 to 4 of these apothecary jars that were given to the doctors in attendance, medical professionals in attendance of that first cremation, just to show that cremation was clean and it purified the remains and that sort of thing. So
yeah, we talk about the doctor, and I'm going to take a sidestep. People need not realize that our profession actually came out of surgeons and doctors, right?
Absolutely.
Surgeons were our first embalmers, and the doctors were the first ones, believe it or not, that came up with cremation.
Yeah, they were worried about poisoning the water and poisoning the air with decomposing bodies. So that
were diseased and spreading that disease. So they came up with cremation in order to help stop the spread.
Right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Right. That's how it got its movement.
Kind of like the CDC, right?
Yes.
The Center for Disease and Control. Yeah. That was them back in that day, right?
Yeah. In
so
a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But the other really interesting thing we have from the Washington County Historical Society is the casket plate that was on the Baron de Palm's casket. Mm-hmm. We also have the record book where the person who operated the crematory would actually record the cremations.
Yeah, kind of like a play-by-play book, right? Of really, exactly really cool. That was what was going on. And, and I always tell when I'm giving a tour of the museum, there's a New York Times article that we now have on display. And if you have time to read the whole article, it really gives you an in-depth look of what was really going on.
So interesting. Yeah. And it was, cremation then was a lot different than it is now. It was a lot more experimental because they didn't have a precedent. They didn't have anything to learn from. So essentially they were trial and error. And also then, cremators now get up to 1,800 degrees at most. If it gets above that, then it starts to create a lot of problems. But then it was, 2,500, 2,000 to 2,500 degrees. And it was a very different experience too. There was no flame within the chamber. It was a fully enclosed chamber only with heat on the outside. So it was like almost like calcination, like reducing the body by heat and not by flame. So that's a big differentiation of what cremation is then versus now.
Yeah, and then the heat also was generated by coal.
Yes,
back
coal.
then.
Yes, and now it's natural gas.
Yeah.
You know, most use natural gas, but it was a form of coal called coke, which is an interesting type of coal. It has a weird connotation to it. When I first started reading about the history of cremation and learned that they would put coke in these things, I thought, wait a minute. This
Are we
could
talking
go
Coca-Cola?
This could go two different ways here, three different ways actually. But no, it was just very interesting to see how different everything was and what the different methods were at the time.
Yeah, because I know part of our struggle in the design phase was where do we begin this journey, right? Because cremation's been going on for so long.
For as long as recorded time and before.
As from pagan rituals to looked at as frowned upon by the Catholic religion for so long. It was a way of almost like what would you say? It was like a step down way of disposing a body, correct?
That's what the Catholic Church and a lot of the opponents of cremation truly thought, that it was a degradation to the body, and it's meant to achieve the same effect that burial does, but in a shorter amount of time, because eventually the body is going to turn back to dust. That's nature's way.
Exactly. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust,
exactly.
Right? That's where that saying comes from.
But with cremation, they were worried, especially with Christian ideas and Christian concepts at the time. The resurrection was a big deal, and the mind could not conceive at the time that the body would decompose to dust anyway. And so they were like, well, how can you be resurrected if your body's not buried? So it's just an interesting journey all the way through the history of cremation. We could do an entire podcast on that, because trust me, there have been full discussions, and they take an hour and a half, 2 hours just to talk through the whole thing. So but we'll definitely have to circle back to that at some point.
Yes, definitely. So we settled on just starting in North America and talking about the cremation and how it began in North America, and by giving an immersive experience to visitors, by allowing them to walk in to the first crematory in North America in Washington, Pennsylvania. It's almost like a teleport, right? Yeah. You're here at the National Museum of Funeral History, but you'll walk into Washington, Pennsylvania. So it's kind of a really, really neat experience. So we talked about the door already that we now have on display that got to ride many, many miles across the country.
So let's talk about that road trip. That was an interesting road trip. So that was 2018. It was March, and we took a gamble by flying to the Northeast, where who knows what the weather was going to be, because it's the Northeast and it's still winter at the beginning of March, in like a lion out like a lamb. And actually it was, that's interesting. That was 5 years ago right now.
Yeah, definitely. Wow. That is really interesting.
Didn't even think about that. Yeah. So I flew to Newark, and I went to Rose Hill Crematory, because they had offered to permanent loan the door of the cremator. One of the first cremators there, that was established in 1906, was built in 1906. And this door, when we say this is a cremator door, it's hard to conceive what that is unless you've seen it in the exhibit. It is a 3 foot by almost 4 foot wide door that weighs 800 pounds. And they were originally going to just put it in the back of the vehicle. We rented a minivan for that. We were going to put it in the back of that, but they ended up building a crate for it, which I'm so grateful for, because that could have been really awkward for that sliding around in the back. And they loaded it in the back of that minivan with a forklift.
Wow. And I unfortunately wasn't there for that.
I know, you missed that. That was a trip. I have a video of that somewhere. I'll have to dig that out somewhere, because it was really an interesting experience, seeing them, how they could get that in the back of the minivan with a hatch up.
Right. Yeah. Yes. That's some talent.
So then from there, I drove down to Philadelphia to pick you up, And from Philadelphia, we drove to Washington, Pennsylvania, through the mountains in the snow. And
Thankfully, we were driving and not walking, right?
it's precisely.
That's most of the stories are all about walking, right? Uphill in the snow.
Uphill in the snow,
yeah,
right, right. Well, here's the funny part that I want to throw at you real quick. I'm driving snow. On top of that, I'm anxious and nervous, and Genevieve says, "Oh my God, the snow is so beautiful. Slow down. I want to take pictures." And I'm trying to drive and keep it on the road and not slide around. And Genevieve is having it. I mean, that's what happens when a girl from Houston goes to where there's snow.
Exactly, because I never get to see snow. So my husband can attest to that. I am like a little kid when it becomes snowy
When it's
outside
snowy
because I never get to see it. And for me, it's very magical.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I get that.
Yes.
That. But not when you're driving in the mountains. You have no idea where you are.
And you have an 800-pound door in the back.
In the 800-pound. But again, that helped with the snow.
Yes, it
that
did,
helped
yes.
us. That helped us stay level. And then we stopped in Washington, Pennsylvania, and there we picked up the crate for the body. We also picked up several other
call that
artifacts.
the crib.
The
The crib,
yeah.
yes.
And then from there, we picked up all of those items, and then from there we drove to Cincinnati, and the Cincinnati Cremation Company, the Catchin family there donated a lot of printed materials, historic booklets, historic documents, that sort of thing on cremation. From Cincinnati, we drove to St. Louis, and that's where our fabricator was or is.
So you could imagine what our van looked like by
This
then,
thing
right?
was it was like a circus car.
Yeah, a circus on wheels, right?
Yes,
With all kind of this weird oddity stuff in it.
It was interesting.
But we were on a mission.
We were on a mission,
Yeah.
and we got it all there. And thankfully, we got that crate out of the back of with that giant cremator door out of the back of that van, and all of the stuff unloaded. Returned the van, and the day we were leaving, I'll never forget. It was snowing again. And we went up in the arch in St.
the
Louis.
St.
Do you
Louis
remember
arch.
that?
Oh,
we could hardly see the ground because
Yes.
it was snowing so much. But
yeah. Well, it didn't start snowing until we got up there.
we got up in it,
By the
yeah.
time we got down, it was gone again.
It was gone,
You know, it
yeah.
was very anticlimactic for me because
Yeah.
I was excited to see the snow once we got down. And if you guys have never been in the Arch of St. Louis, this is part of our trip. I
Yeah.
kid you not. So both Jason and Dan purposely did not tell me what to expect. And we get in. If you've never been in the St. Louis Arch, you have to get in these little pods. And when I say a pod, it's supposed to fit 5 people. And you guys don't know, but Jason, how tall are you, Jason?
6'3".
You're 6'3".
I'm not a basketball player. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. And so we're in this pod that has 5 seats in it, and there's 4 people in this pod, and our knees are literally like on top of each other. We are knee to knee, and the door closes, and we don't move. And we're still not moving. And all of a sudden, I just looked at Jason. I said, Jason, I have to lay my head on your shoulder. I feel like I'm going to pass out. I realized in that moment that I became claustrophobic. And my body reacted to the fact that I could not see anything around me. I was enclosed in this capsule with 4 people. And
Well, there was that 4-inch window that you could have.
But we got to remember we weren't moving.
I know.
And because we weren't moving, that window also on the other side of that
blocked,
glass
yeah,
was
with the door,
blocked
yeah.
with the door. And finally they come on and they said, "Sorry, you're going to have to disembark because we're having mechanical issues." So we got out, and
See, I'm the historian, and I don't remember this, but I remember it when you're saying it.
Yeah,
I remember.
yeah,
I'm like,
well,
oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
I remember because of the impact it had on me, and I was
yeah.
really perplexed that I had that type of reaction. I regrouped myself, and they said, "Okay, you can get back in." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know if I can," but I pulled up my big girl straps, and I went back in there, and then we started moving. And once we started moving, I was okay because then the window gave way to the staircase that the people would use to walk up and do any mechanical, necessities.
you could actually see something
you can
outside.
see something. You could see a stairwell. I could see an exit if needed, right?
But I remember that your anxiety started up again
Yeah.
when you go part of the way up, and they have to readjust because you're going up the arch.
Mm-hmm.
And so you slow down really slow, and then the pod starts to turn with you in it, and then
Yeah.
it straightens up, and then it turns with you. It's it's a very interesting experience.
So it's kind of, you can kind of lend it to almost being buried alive, right? I mean, could you imagine?
Except the movement.
Yeah, the movement, of
Other
course.
than
Yes.
that, but yeah, that pod buried alive with 4 people that you only know one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Crazy thought. But yeah, so I remember. And then, but another thing that I remember is that you wanted to stop at almost every cemetery between Pennsylvania and St. Louis.
That is not untrue at all.
Not at all. I mean, I think I learned and saw more mausoleums, cemeteries on that trip than I ever thought I would.
I think I took you to 2 others too, just there in St. Louis, 2 historic crematories there in St. Louis. And that was a really cool time, because that's when everything really came together for the cremation exhibit. For about 3 years, we were doing the minutia, the little things, getting everything where it needed to be, raising money, getting stuff where it would place, getting the plans done. We had in 2017, I remember we had the kind of the unveiling at the golf tournament that year.
Yes.
And then in 2018, we had the bones up of the building, of the crematory
just the walls
building,
and
just
stuff,
the
yes.
walls, and let people walk in. But then in September, we had it all completed, and that week was so much fun for me, because here's all this work that you and I had spent so much time on.
Years.
And Barbara would come in, and she would enter in her part, and then Dan Blanton, our fabricator, would come in, and just the 4 of us, but mainly me and Genevieve. There were times we'd spend a whole week together.
Yes, definitely.
But we came up with this really, really cool exhibit. I mean, I'm very proud of it.
Oh, I am too. And it's interesting to, for people that don't understand what it takes in creating an exhibit, the most important component of the exhibit, besides the design, are the artifacts that you put in it. And if you can't get an artifact, you don't really have an exhibit, right? So that was probably our biggest challenge after figuring out, where do we start? What time period do we begin this exhibit? And then, like I said, casting that net and see what was out there. And we managed to catch some really big fish.
We had some really, really good stuff with the cremated remains of Baron de Palm, the cremator door from the cremator in Washington, Pennsylvania, that's in the Lemoyne room.
Yes.
And then also the one from Rose Hill in Linden, New Jersey.
And then American Cremator came forth. So I have to tell you, I'm a cremationist. I mean, as in I'm a certified cremator, operator. And I used to cremate. I worked at a pet crematory, and I cremated animals for people. And I've always been fascinated with the process of cremation and the science of cremation, how to make the cremator work and operate and keep it under control, right? Because you got to keep that machine under control. Yeah. And so one of my visions was always to have the front of the cremator in our museum as part of the cremation exhibit, to get people to understand what a cremator is, right? And I just remember one of the industry conventions that we went to, and I was right across the walkway or the aisle from American Crematory, and I thought, oh, if I could get them to build just the front for me.
Well, what was really cool about them is that you mentioned it and they volunteered it.
Yeah.
It was so wonderful that they stepped in and did that instantly.
Yeah.
We didn't we barely had to even mention the cremation exhibit, and they were, what can we do?
Yeah, exactly. And so it was really just nice to see. Sometimes it's nice to see our dream actually come to reality. And so I just remember them bringing that piece in. I mean, it's a monstrous piece. Bringing it in and installing it. And I was like, whoa, finally I have this. Yes, I finally have it.
Well,
and so,
I love that we put the TV in the opening.
Yes, the TV. Yes. So people can actually understand the process of cremation. And it is done in a very educational way. And when I say educational, this is the same video that the Cremation Association of North America provides to people in the industry to teach them.
To train them for operating cremation chambers.
Exactly, yeah. So it's and people don't realize that there is a science to it, and there is a sense of finesse in operating these machines. Yeah. And then, of course, let's talk about the recycling companies, right? Because as we're like putting this exhibit together, we started realizing there's so many more components that.
Well, the containers that we have from Star Mark and AMA Containers.
Yes.
They provided the
containers.
The minimum, cardboard container for cremation.
It's an alternative container.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
Alternative container, AKA otherwthat known as a cardboard box, right? Yes. But it's very fancy, right? And it's what they use to put the body in, so that when the body gets wheeled into the crematory, it's done so in a very dignified manner, right? And then we use the cardboard box because that's a better material to have less of a carbon
environmental
burn
impact,
off, as well as it doesn't char the bones as much, because if people don't realize, cremation really at the end is we're left with just the bones. And so you can see that there's some color variance within the ashes that are the end result based off of what the body was cremated with. Was it a casket or was it an alternative container? And I think those are, interesting things that we point out. And then, talking about the recycling, right? The, Mid-State Recycling was a great organization that stepped up and said, yeah, we'll work with you. What do you want? And I said, well, help us understand this whole recycling process that people don't realize, and give us some video footage so people can see it and we can add it to this video. And believe it or not, we're talking about the metal that's in the bodies that can't go into the pulverizer. It'll damage the pulverizer. Right. And the pulverizer is used to reduce the bones to the ash that most people are very familiar with. And so you've got to retrieve the metal out of there, right? And we're talking knee replacements, perhaps some
hip replacements. We even have on display, we have the spine.
Yeah, we have somebody who had a repair on their spine. And so any type of metal, even within the teeth, if you have metal within your teeth, all that takes out. And then they reduce all of that metal down.
And recycle it.
They melt it all down and recycle it. And in our video even talks about that some of that recycled material is now found in our cell phones.
Yes.
It's amazing that, all of this stuff comes to fruition when you do something as simple as creating a
cremation exhibit. Yeah. And again, that's one of the things that modern consumers really appreciate about cremation is the multitude of options and ideas that come with it. It doesn't restrict. In fact, it opens up a lot more opportunities for services, for remembrances, for memorials, for placement of the remains, for multiple placements of the remains.
You're talking about options, right? So let's fast forward to the end of our exhibit.
Wait, we've got to go through the urns still because
I wanted to say that for last. Okay, we'll step back to that because that one I think is really fascinating.
We got some really cool stuff in there.
Yeah, we do. But we were talking about the fact that after you get cremated, there's still so many more options, right? You could become a tree, right? I mean, that was really cool. And learning about being in an urn that's biodegradable, that you can just kind of become one with the ocean or one with the land.
Yeah, the living urn has that exhibit in our modern expressions area. Yeah. And it's really fascinating to see that cremated remains can be placed beneath a tree. They have a really interesting soil mix that protects the roots of the tree, because the roots of the tree try to grow outward first, but eventually they're going to grow downward. And by then the tree is established, but that little layer of soil helps to protect the tree roots from the cremated remains.
Yeah, because isn't it true that the cremated remains are not, they're
toxic.
They are toxic.
Because they have a large amount of ammonia in them.
And a lot of carbon. And so some of that is not so healthy. So they put nutrients in that help kind of counterbalance that.
Exactly. To
allow that tree to have the nourishments it needs in order to grow.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that either,
Right.
But we talk about all kind of fascinating things that we can do with cremated remains. Let's talk about the diamond, right?
Diamond, yeah.
I mean, we are carbon once we become cremated remains. And so carbon's what you need, time and pressure, in order to create the diamond. And I know within my journey of creating the exhibit, I actually took my sister's cremated remains all the way to Switzerland. At Guardanza, that company, they raised their hand and said, yeah, we would love to participate and be part of this amazing exhibit. And so we went to Switzerland, and you didn't get to go on that trip.
No, I didn't. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Yeah, I am too.
But we got to see the process and how it works. But for me, I have to say that was probably the most difficult text panel to put together. Just because
it's so much.
Oh, it's so complex.
Such a process that you really have to demonstrate it and show it for people to understand.
There's an order to this process, and it's very scientific. And it took me a long time, but I got it. There's a lot of information in a little text panel.
A lot of information in a 3x3 text panel.
Yes,
so
exactly.
3 foot by 3 foot.
Yeah. I mean, Jason, I can talk with you forever, right?
Yeah, we could sit here
and I know we're running
day.
low on our time, but let's go back to that urn collection. So we do have this amazing section within the History of Cremation exhibit that speaks to the urns. And I have to kind of say it's like a tribute to you, if you will, and your urn collection, because I think what we have out in that exhibit on display, I want to say maybe is like a tenth of your collection.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Yeah.
And we luckily have several other contributors as well. Fresh Pond Crematory is the oldest continuously operating crematory in the country, and they donated 4 urns to us that are just unmatched. 2 of them are from 1895, and they are very, very ornate and decorative and very Victorian, very beautiful. And then there's one from the 30s, and then some from the time of World War II, when bronze wasn't used as for making urns at that time. But we have also some from the Cincinnati Cremation Company, Woodlawn. We have folks from different funeral homes in the area. A lot to mention, but
it's interesting when you're sitting there talking about it. I remember, we visited those places in this whole process of doing the research.
That was one of my favorite parts of the whole thing, was being able to go and see and visit and
get to know the people that run it, right? And have been running it for years and years, generational.
And that's one of the things I really appreciated about it too, was being able to help to tell their story also, because a lot of times these crematories in various parts of the country, they're in the back end of a cemetery, or they're not connected with a cemetery. And so they often get overlooked because they don't have the same draw as the huge arboretum and cemetery that's very popular in larger cities. But we're still able to tell their story as best as possible. And that's through pictures and words and urns and artifacts, and what a great exhibit overall to bring together.
Yeah. So, I challenge people, if they get an opportunity and if they're traveling through a small town and they see some of these old mausoleums and they're open, go in them. It's just fascinating. They're ornate. Some of them are very ornate.
It sounds weird to say that to people who aren't in the funeral industry, because I know a lot of people in the funeral profession who, when they're traveling, they'll find the local cemeteries and check them out and that sort of thing. But it sounds weird to say that, to go walk through a mausoleum, but there's some that have works of art that are museum quality. There's some that have Tiffany stained glass, and so many stained glass manufacturers across the country that have installed these gorgeous windows in these mausoleums. So it's not just a bunch of walls of rows of dead people. It is truly works of art and a beautiful experience. So
yeah, my husband, bless his heart, we went to Santa Fe on vacation, and we actually stopped at the cemetery too.
I hope so.
We did. I
wouldn't expect anything less from you, Jen.
So it is. You are right. As people in the industry, we're going
to go there. We're going to go there.
Yes,
we're going to drag the people we love along, whether they like it or not.
Exactly. It's just kind of goes along with the territory. It truly is
part of the process.
It is. It truthfully is. So, but yeah. So, Jason, gosh, your knowledge is almost like an abyss when it comes to the history of cremation. And I find it so fascinating. And I know there's just so much there that has been untouched. If there was anything that you could really highlight, showcase, something that probably stands out to you maybe more than something else in all of your research? Do you have anything like that in your mind?
It's really fascinating because there's a lot of things over time that have changed with cremation. But the thing at the very end of the day that I have always appreciated about cremation is the ability to take a loved one's remains and place them in a place that's meaningful, whether that's a cemetery, whether that's a scattering garden, whether it's a placement on their own property, whether it's placement in a lake or in the ocean or wherever. But the thing that I found is most important for the preservation of society and culture is to find a place to make a permanent marking of the person who passed away. So many people that I've admired and looked up to, whether they're professionals, whether they're movie people, whether they're TV people, they have chosen cremation, but they are choosing to be scattered and not have a place to visit. And you cannot underscore enough the importance of having a place to visit that gives you a centered place to remember a loved one. Memories fade, time fades, but here we are still walking through cemeteries that are hundreds of years old and honoring these lives as we walk through the cemeteries. Cremation is no different. Creating a memorial is just as important or sometimes more important for people who choose cremation because it's something that they don't consider is necessary right off. And that is probably the thing that I've learned the most as far as the importance of that for culture, for posterity, for remembering people's names, for
and genealogy.
Yeah,
right. I mean, because I you're sitting here, I'm listening to you talk about this, and I'm thinking that if I chose to be scattered, I've just now erased my existence.
All that's left of you then is memories, paper, and a computer database somewhere. And when the zombie apocalypse comes, what are we supposed to do with all this paper and computers that have crashed and failed? And when we get invaded by aliens, what are they going to think of our society when all these people just vanish every year because they were cremated and scattered and no memorial left?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's not a good choice for anybody. I mean, everybody has their choice. For me, there's that that you want to be able to leave your mark, right? And how do you want that mark to be left, right? We talk about the dash, we talk about leaving a mark, we talk about leaving a legacy, and we talk about having that second death. So I think those are all things that we could, maybe highlight in the future to help people understand that when we die, we want to make sure that we're remembered in some way.
And it's important whether you consider, and this is talking to the people who are listening, if you don't consider yourself important enough to be remembered, remember that there are other people who do think you're important enough to be remembered. So consider their feelings too in the process of it all, because they're the ones who have to live with the decisions that are made in the process along the way.
That is very true and very heartfelt. I mean, yes, and impactful, because there's so many times that we really don't think about how deep that vein actually runs when we're trying to make these very difficult choices. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I have to say thank you so much for coming in and joining me and helping listeners get a little bit of a backstory on the history of cremation exhibit, understanding what goes into creating an exhibit here at the museum. But I think at the end of the day, we really do put fun in funeral when we're creating that exhibit, right?
We really did.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. And it all culminated with the opening of the exhibit and having hundreds of people here to witness it, to see the exhibit open. What an amazing time.
It validated all that hard work.
All of that 5 years of hard work and us putting up with each other.
Yes, definitely. We did manage to kill each other, right, along the way.
We had a lot of fajitas and margaritas along the way. We will say that.
Yeah, we will say that. And the good thing is that we didn't kill each other because we do know somebody who knows how to cremate.
Oh, this is true. This is true. Yes. I have a key, I think, to the crematorium still.
And I have a certificate that says I can cremate. So we're good. So, Jason, thank you again so much for joining us here on
Thanks
The
for having
Final
me.
Curtain Never Closes with your host, Genevieve Keeney Vasquez, CEO of the National Museum of Funeral History. And we thank you, our listeners, for tuning in and helping us make this an amazing opportunity for all to learn more about our industry and want to come out and see the National Museum of Funeral History. And I hope that you will share this episode and our future episodes with family and friends. We look forward to any feedback you have to offer by giving us a review on Apple or Spotify. And we hope that you will join us for a virtual tour at www.nmfh.org. And always remember, any day above ground is a good one.